In a Shenzhen workshop, a worker is building a pair of wireless earbuds. The chips are real, the brand is fake. The chips were pulled from discarded electronics, laser polished, their markings erased. The casing was injection molded down the street. The box, factory sealed, the serial number passes authentication. In 48 hours, they ship to Hong Kong. Then they scatter: Manila, Dubai, Lagos, Los Angeles. Sold for $50 or $100 or $200. 6 kilometers away is the official store with the same earbuds selling for $250. Same chips, same casing. Sometimes the same hands. The only difference is whose name is on the box. This is how the legitimate electronics industry and the global counterfeit trade became the same business. The center of the global counterfeit electronics trade is not hidden. It is one of the most visited commercial districts in southern China. The Huaqiang Bay Market in Shenzhen occupies roughly 1.5 square kilometers in the Futian district of the city. The area handles transactions estimated at over 400 billion renminbi per year. It welcomes between 300,000 and 500,000 visitors daily. Chinese authorities describe it officially as a center of electronics commerce. The United States Trade Representative has named it for years in its annual review of notorious markets, citing its high-volume retail and bulk sales of counterfeit electronics that flow out of Shenzhen to the rest of the world. In its most recent review, the Trade Representative listed the Huaqiang Bay Electronics Malls and the Luohu Commercial City in Shenzhen, along with the Baiyun Leather Trading Center and the Qinsun Market in Guangzhou, among the physical markets it flags for counterfeiting. The same review concluded that China remains the single largest source of counterfeit goods seized anywhere in the world, accounting for the overwhelming majority of what customs authorities intercept. These markets do not operate underground. They operate openly in commercial buildings with storefronts and standard business hours. The reason this trade is concentrated in southern China is structural. The Pearl River Delta region, which includes Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Dongguan, and several other manufacturing cities, has built the world's most sophisticated electronics manufacturing supply chain over the past 4 decades. Apple, Samsung, Sony, and nearly every major consumer electronics brand depend on factories in this region for some or all of their production. The same supply chain that produces the world's authentic electronics also produces the world's counterfeits. The distribution of these counterfeits has historically been controlled, at least in part, by Hong Kong triad societies. The 14K Triad, founded in 1945 and currently estimated to have around 20,000 members, has documented involvement in counterfeit goods, trafficking spanning decades. The Sun Yi'an, the Woxing Wo, and several smaller triad groups have similar documented involvement. Beginning in the early 1980s, these organizations expanded from Hong Kong into Shenzhen and the broader Pearl River Delta. Shenzhen police conducted multiple anti-triad campaigns between 1982 and 1989, arresting more than 300 triad members from over 10 different organizations. The campaigns disrupted specific operations. They did not eliminate the trade. To understand how this works, you have to understand something the global electronics industry generally does not advertise. When Apple produces an iPhone, the device is assembled in factories operated by contract manufacturers, primarily Foxconn, along with Pegatron and Luxshare, located in mainland China. The chips inside come from suppliers including Qualcomm, Broadcom, and Texas Instruments, manufactured at fabrication plants across Taiwan, South Korea, and the United States. The displays come from BOE, Samsung, and LG. The cameras come from Sony. The final assembly happens in factories that employ tens of thousands of workers and operate at industrial scale. The same factories, the same workers, and in some documented cases, the same components also flow into the counterfeit market. The mechanism is known within the industry as the ghost shift. A factory contracted to produce 100,000 units of an authentic product runs the official production line during normal operating hours. After the official shift ends, the same equipment, sometimes operated by the same workers, produces additional unauthorized units using the same designs, the same materials, and in some cases authentic components diverted from the legitimate supply chain. These ghost shift units are physically identical to the authentic product. They simply lack the formal authorization of the brand whose name appears on them. In October 2025, Shenzhen police arrested members of a syndicate that had been selling counterfeit semiconductor chips marketed as authentic products from Infineon Technologies, Texas Instruments, and Analog Devices. The syndicate's operation involved collecting discarded chips, laser polishing them to remove their original markings, relabeling them as imported products, and selling them to mainland Chinese manufacturers of automotive electronics and industrial control systems. The fake chips were prone to malfunctions and posed safety risks. The operation had run for years before being disrupted. It was described by Chinese state media as the country's first major criminal case targeting fake imported chips, which suggests how often similar operations have continued without enforcement action. This pattern is not unusual. Industry researchers who study counterfeit electronics describe the phenomenon in technical terms. The same engineers who design legitimate products often consult on or directly produce counterfeits during off hours. The same component suppliers who serve authentic brands often sell excess inventory or unauthorized production runs to counterfeit operations. The same logistics networks that move authentic electronics also move counterfeit electronics, often through the same ports and the same customs channels. What changes from authentic to counterfeit is not the physical product. What changes is the chain of authorization behind it. The counterfeit electronics market is not one market, it is a hierarchy. At the bottom tier are obvious fakes sold at tourist markets and through low-end online listings. The components inside are low grade. The build quality is poor. The products may or may not function as advertised. They retail for somewhere between $20 and $50 for items that mimic premium consumer electronics. The buyer is generally aware these products are not authentic. The buyer wants the appearance or the basic functionality at a fraction of the real price. These products are typically assembled in unauthorized factories using cheap third-party components, often with no connection to the legitimate supply chain. In the middle tier are functional counterfeits that work as designed but use lower-grade components than the authentic version. The packaging is convincing. The product functions for a reasonable period before failing. These products retail between $100 and $300. They are often sold through online marketplaces with varying degrees of deception about their authenticity. Many buyers in this tier are uncertain whether they are buying genuine or counterfeit and accept the lower price without asking questions. At the top of the hierarchy are what the trade calls AAA grade or super fakes. These are produced in legitimate factories during ghost shifts, using authentic or near-authentic components, with construction that matches the authentic product in every meaningful respect. The only way to identify them is through the brand's internal serial number verification systems, and even those are sometimes subverted by counterfeiters using authentic serial numbers harvested from legitimate products. AAA-grade counterfeits can retail close to the authentic price. They have appeared in the supply chains of major retailers. They have ended up in government procurement contracts. The most documented case of high-grade counterfeit electronics entering critical supply chains involves the United States Department of Defense. A 2012 Senate Armed Services Committee investigation identified counterfeit electronics in military aircraft, including chips that had been salvaged from discarded electronics, refurbished in Shenzhen workshops, and sold to Defense Department contractors as new authentic components. The investigation traced one supplier's counterfeit chips to a Chinese company that had originally sourced them from electronic waste dumps. The chips were installed in aircraft including the C-27J Spartan and the P-8 Poseidon, both military aviation programs critical to United States operational capability. This is the structural reality. The same supply chain that arms the United States military also feeds counterfeit chips back into that supply chain through Shenzhen workshops, operated by people who may have no idea where their products ultimately end up. Here is the part of the story that the major electronics brands prefer not to discuss publicly. Apple, Samsung, and other major brands know exactly where counterfeit production happens. They employ teams of intellectual property lawyers. They cooperate with Chinese police on raids. They publish anti-counterfeiting statements regularly. Apple specifically has filed thousands of takedown requests and pursued numerous high-profile cases against counterfeit operations. What these brands do not do is structurally disrupt the manufacturing infrastructure of southern China. The reason is the same reason the Italian luxury fashion industry tolerates the counterfeit operations in Naples. The major electronics brands depend on the manufacturing capacity, supplier relationships, and labor pools that exist in the Pearl River Delta. No other region of the world can match the scale, speed, and cost of Chinese electronics manufacturing. Vietnam, India, and Mexico have grown as alternatives, but none have replicated the full supplier ecosystem that exists in Shenzhen and Guangzhou. If Apple actually pushed Chinese authorities to dismantle the counterfeit operations through aggressive enforcement, the brands would risk the relationships and access they need to manufacture their authentic products. There is also a second reason that is rarely discussed. The counterfeit market functions as a brand exposure mechanism in markets where the authentic products are unaffordable. The teenager in Manila who buys a counterfeit pair of AirPods for $40 is not a customer Apple was ever going to capture at the authentic price point. But that teenager carrying that product, using it daily, posting photos with it on social media, is generating brand awareness and aspirational positioning. Years later, if that same teenager's income rises, they are significantly more likely to purchase an authentic Apple product than someone who never engaged with the brand at all. The brands do not say this publicly. The official position is total opposition to counterfeiting. The actual behavior is calibrated tolerance. Aggressive enough enforcement to maintain legal posture and protect specific high-value products. Not aggressive enough to threaten the manufacturing infrastructure that the legitimate business depends on. For the triad organizations that historically controlled distribution of counterfeit electronics, the trade was one revenue stream among several. Drug trafficking has always been more profitable per unit. Human trafficking generates higher margins. Gambling operations generate steadier cash flow. But counterfeiting offered structural advantages the other businesses did not provide. The penalties for counterfeit trafficking are far lower than for drug trafficking. International law enforcement attention is far lower. Customs inspections focus on narcotics and weapons before they focus on electronics. The customer base is built in. Tourists and online buyers in dozens of countries actively seek out counterfeit products, and law enforcement does not pursue these consumers as participants in organized crime. The cash generated by counterfeit electronics also serves a critical secondary purpose. It launders profits from more dangerous criminal activities. A triad organization that earns significant revenue from drug trafficking faces the persistent problem of converting that cash into legitimate-appearing assets. Counterfeit electronics provide an ideal laundering vehicle. Large volumes of cash move through electronics wholesale operations every day. Mixing illegitimate drug profits with legitimate-seeming electronics trade revenue is mechanically straightforward. The international reach of the distribution networks is significant. Counterfeit electronics produced in Shenzhen workshops flow through Hong Kong, then through international shipping ports including Dubai, Rotterdam, and Los Angeles, into retail markets in dozens of countries. The same shipping infrastructure that moves authentic electronics moves the counterfeits. The same wholesale buyers who order authentic products sometimes order counterfeits as side inventory. The system is integrated with the legitimate trade at every level. Recent decades have seen the gradual mainlandization of triad operations, as the organizations followed China's economic opening across the border and embedded themselves in the markets and supply chains of the Pearl River Delta. The specific organizational structure of triad involvement in counterfeit electronics has evolved as a result. What has not changed is the underlying economic logic. The trade persists because the demand persists, the supply chain enables it, and the enforcement priorities of every relevant government remain focused on other criminal categories. The counterfeit electronics market only exists because consumers and businesses continue to purchase what it produces. The buyer profile is more varied than most people assume. Budget consumers buy obvious fakes knowing they are not authentic. Middle-tier buyers purchase functional counterfeits through online marketplaces with uncertain authenticity. Sophisticated buyers, including resellers and electronics distributors, purchase AAA-grade counterfeits and may not always disclose their actual source. The most consequential buyers are not individual consumers. They are businesses and governments. Counterfeit electronics enter corporate supply chains through distributors who may not realize what they are selling. They enter retail supply chains through wholesalers who source from gray market suppliers. They enter government procurement through contractors who do not adequately vet their component sources. The Defense Department case is the most documented example, but similar incidents have occurred across critical infrastructure, including telecommunications, energy, transportation, and healthcare. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has estimated the global counterfeit goods market at well over $400 billion a year, more than 2% of all world trade. Counterfeit electronics represent a substantial portion of this market, particularly given the high unit values involved and the difficulty of authentication for sophisticated devices. The customer who knowingly purchases an obvious fake is participating in a transparent transaction. The customer who unknowingly purchases a high-grade counterfeit may never know what they have bought because the products are designed to be indistinguishable from authentic without specialized testing. At the top of the market, the line between authentic and counterfeit becomes philosophical rather than physical, and the question becomes whether a product's value is determined by its construction or by the company that authorized it. This is the question the global electronics industry would prefer customers not consider. Structural arrangement persists because every party benefits from it not changing. The triad organizations get cash and laundering channels. The major electronics brands get continued access to Chinese manufacturing capacity, along with brand exposure in markets where authentic products would never be purchased anyway. The Chinese regional economy gets employment in factories that operate in both legal and illegal modes. The consumer gets the option to purchase products that look and function like premium electronics at a fraction of the authentic price. The only party that does not benefit is the official narrative. The story that authentic Apple products and Samsung products represent uncompromised quality, exclusive manufacturing relationships, and protected brand integrity. That story is not exactly false. The products really are designed by the brands and manufactured by trusted contractors. What the story leaves out is that the same description applies to a substantial portion of the counterfeit market, made in the same facilities by similar workers using comparable components. The earbuds assembled in the Shenzhen workshop and shipped to Manila for $50 are, in many of the most important physical respects, similar to the earbuds that the official store 6 kilometers away sells for $250. The physical object is comparable. The economic and legal status is entirely different. The difference is created by the box, the serial number, the chain of custody, and the company's authorization. Everything that gives the authentic product its value is information about the product, not properties of the product itself. This is the deeper architecture of the global electronics industry. It is not really about chips and plastic and circuit boards. It is about a coordinated act of imagination in which consumers and brands agree that certain products are worth several times what physically similar products are worth, even when the products are made in adjacent facilities by workers with similar skills using overlapping supply chains. The counterfeit electronics industry exists because that coordinated agreement is beneath the surface, partly fictional. If you want to understand how the businesses that quietly run modern markets actually work, the ones that engineer the scarcity, license the brands, and decide what a circuit board is worth based on which company sealed the box, subscribe to Terminal Wealth. We break down the businesses hiding in plain sight, one industry at a time,